The NBA is simply not what it used to be. The NBA used to have like a lot of storylines, a lot of action, just something that kind of made you look forward to watching the games, whether it be, Jason Kidd versus Kobe Bryant back in the day, or just, seeing the upbringing of like Derrick Rose going into Chicago and everything that went into that, or even just being, a person that lived in Cleveland and seeing LeBron James kind of shape shift Cleveland to be something that maybe they can win a championship. But it feels like the NBA is far removed from that and far removed from that atmosphere because I think there's a bunch of reasons why they are kind of struggling. Now, a lot of people look at the ratings and say the ratings are down 48% and it continues to drop. And that is problematic, especially from the fact that, people are more likely to watch TV than they are to actually go to the games. And so, one of the biggest things that people tend to look at, they say, oh, maybe it's the three pointers. Maybe because people are taking too many three pointers that is kind of diluting the game. I think that is not the best way to look at it. However, I do see that there could be some type of factor of being a little bit boring seeing the same amount of threes go in and whatnot. However, I think there's more things when you actually look into the game. And that's not to say that that isn't an impact or that doesn't have an effect. But I think there's something a little bit more to that that can actually kind of bring a little bit more light. One of the biggest things that I'll kind of like leave to the end, but if we're going to keep on the gameplay, is that simply role players have gotten a lot better. Back in the day, you didn't really see that many players do a turnaround fade on the baseline that you kind of do now. Back then you only had like, your stars that were able to shoot any type of way, and then it became a big theatric because, well, we don't really see anybody else do this. Like seeing Kobe Bryant hit a back turn fadeaway is something that was special because there wasn't really that many people on his team, let alone the league, that was able to do that. And so when you see Kobe Bryant do the moves that he does, you're like, wow, this guy's really, really special. And same with Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade had an iconic way of just shifting through and out the paint. Even though he wasn't necessarily a great shooter, he was decent enough from the mid range and good enough to utilize that little space that he could have, that he could really bring to the game and get to the basket. And you see that all sorts of ways. Even Tim Duncan, Mr. Fundamentals, averaging around 22 points for his whole career, he was able to do quite a bunch of things that you typically would never see, like bank shots. Back in the day, bank shots were something that was a little bit more of the rave than it is now. But bank shots was pretty much popularized by Tim Duncan. But you don't really see that anymore. You don't really see like the Tim Duncan types of people. You kind of see more of archetypes. And there's a reason for that. And that is because a lot of the players today, including the role players, have drastically improved their game. We are seeing role players do things that we have never seen before. In terms of, you will never ever want a person from back in the day shooting a pull-up three or a crazy Euro dunk in between traffic, or just doing some crazy phenomenal English on the backboard, for a layup. You would never really see that. Instead, now, today, you're seeing that all over the place. You're seeing role players actually kind of thrive because the level of play has gotten so much better. But what does this do to the overall impact of the game? In my opinion, it makes the game look a little bit samey. What's the difference between a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a Norman Powell? Well, there's vast differences, but if you're just simply just looking at the game and not really analyzing or seeing anything different, you would see that a lot of the things that Shai will do is something that maybe Jalen Brunson will do or Norman Powell will do. It's just that he has the ball a lot more and is able to kind of play make a lot more than the typical role player. But there's always an idea that, NBA players are all great, and listen, they are. But a lot of them, if given more opportunity, would actually shine a lot more. And of course, because the scale is already tipped towards like you're competing against the best of the best, this is not always true. But what is true is that role players have greatly elevated themselves to just not like, you back in the day, you would have role players who weren't able to really like dribble, weren't really able to shoot, weren't really able to dunk, but they were great on defense, i.e. an Andre Roberson back in the OKC era. But you can even go further beyond that, But now you see that, okay, maybe everybody can shoot. Everybody can pretty much do something great. They might have a weakness or two in their game, but it's not that drastic. there's not that much of a drastic difference from a lot of these players. Now, you can look at their stats and see, well, they're just not simply putting up the same amount of stats as, let's say, like a Nikola Jokic might be able to because everything runs through him. But if you were to look at the average center today, the average center today can kind of dribble. The average center today can kind of shoot the ball a little bit more. They might not be able to have the post moves that a lot of back in the day centers had, but that's simply because, in my opinion, we're trying to stretch the floor out a lot more so that it will allow a lot of the role players or a lot of just anybody on the court to attack the paint. Because why would you want to have a rim protector in the paint? And so that's why you'll see the emergences of like a Robin Lopez or a Brook Lopez, whichever one is on Milwaukee right now. I get them always confused. But you'll see more of stretch bigs, and that is simply because they want the floor to be stretched out. But the byproduct is that you're not going to get that many people with great post games. But for the most part, a lot of the players kind of do a lot of the same stuff, except for when we talk about defense. But defense is not really what sells the tickets, doesn't sell the eyes. It's the offense. And so when you're seeing players, and I always say Norman Powell because I really do love and enjoy his game. When you see players like Norman Powell do the things that he does, and he's really shocking a lot of people today because people didn't think that he was that great of a player. But I always saw that he was a certified bucket, and there's only a few players in the NBA that are role players that can get that certified bucket label from me, and he is definitely one of them. A last person before that was Seth Curry, but you don't really see him that much anymore anyway. But I say this to say that the NBA just simply have a problem with trying to keep the level of play distinct because a lot of people tend to do a lot of the same stuff. You just see a little bit more of that with a few players that are kind of like the tippy top, the creme de la creme, the person that's going to have the ball majority of the game. But the biggest issue that the NBA has, and some players and some fans have been speaking about it, but it simply just comes down to how you are going to able to watch the games. For a lot of us, we have issues watching our home teams. There is the idea of blackouts where you legitimately cannot watch your home team. Right now, I can't watch the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls is my team through thick and thin. Even if we are trash, even if we are terrible, I like to at least see the dumpster fire on TV. However, I can't watch their games anymore on TV. I have to download an app. Now, this might be different for every other team, so you guys in the comment sections, give me a little bit more insight on how you watch, let's say, a San Antonio Spurs game or, a Brooklyn Nets game. But if you're not on national television, it's really hard to see these games. And so what do? Sometimes you simply just don't watch. Other times you watch it on illegal sites, illegal streaming sites. But people have the desire to watch the games. It's just how can you watch the games when you're quite literally making it difficult to do so? I look at it as this. If you are running a company and you want to sell products, you want the process of selling products to be the most simplest process ever so that people can just already make the hard decision on whether or not they want to buy the product. And once they like it enough that they want to buy the product, it's just a simple, okay, cool, let me buy it. For the NBA, a lot of people love basketball. Basketball is one of the most fastest growing sports in the world, especially when it comes to certain Asian countries as well. But when you cannot simply watch the game and you have to download Netflix, you have to download, Amazon, you have to download a bunch of different streaming apps just to be able to watch everything. You have to download ESPN, you have to watch TNT. There's so many different avenues for you just to watch one singular game. And those games are just games of teams that you've seen thousands of times over. But what happens when you don't have a game where it's like an OKC game? How many nationwide games do they have? How can we see them play a lot more? Usually, I would watch those teams on NBA TV. However, they made that a free service, which was a free service, back into a paid service. So now I can't even watch those teams anymore. And so you have a bunch of people who are starved to see a lot more basketball content, but they just simply cannot do so. And unless you watch it on illegal streaming apps or illegal streaming streams, you're not going to be able to watch it. You're simply not. And this goes into my other problem with the NBA. And this might be a little bit more than just, being able to watch games, even though I do think it's kind of like a 1A, 1B situation, is the fact that there's nothing when it comes to marketing or storylines for the NBA. Like, absolutely nothing. there used to be a lot of interviews where you would ask the players themselves and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Like one of the biggest interviews that I remember back in the day was when James Harden was trying to win MVP and Giannis was right there. And one of the things that kind of like made a lot of people want to watch, the Houston Rockets versus the Bucks is because Harden told Giannis saying that, I need to have skill to actually play the game and not just be able to run and dunk. And then that just brought up a lot of chatter, a lot of like angst, a lot of like, man, this is going to be super exciting watching them play. And it was. James Harden was basically a rock star back in the Houston days and doing everything he used to do. And then like things were just so fun. It was just so great to watch. Or even just the Warriors Cavs dynasty. Now, due to the CBAs, you can't really have a dynasty anymore. It's really difficult just to even maintain role players, which will have its own negative effects. But, what do you do for the next person in line? Like LeBron James has been pretty much holding that mantle for the last 2 decades, right? And really, the failure to expand upon LeBron James really goes onto the shoulders of Zion Williamson, because Zion was supposed to be that next guy. He was supposed to be the it guy. Many people thought it was going to be Lonzo Ball, but Lonzo Ball's a guard, and it's really hard for a guard to kind of be the next it guy. But we were all encapsulated with just how great Zion was coming from high school, coming from college, getting into the NBA. We were super excited. Of course, there were people who had their worries, like myself, in terms of how is he going to play an 82-game season with the weight that he's at and the way that he plays. But people, by and large, were super excited, and the NBA was really hyping it up. This is the next guy. They had commercials where young LeBron James was tossing up alley-oops to Zion Williamson. But when that failed, and failed horribly because Zion could not stay in shape, there has never been a reshuffling of the cards. Never been hey, let's actually showcase a lot of our young stars. Not just Luka Doncic, because Luka is still in the big market, but a lot of our young stars that are in kind of like smaller markets. Like Cam Thomas is a certified walking bucket in my eyes, and not in the sense that he's a role player, but in the sense that he has the ability to take over games. Now, granted, is his team good? No, absolutely not. But why don't we do something fun over there? Why don't we have a lot more interviews, do a lot more press runs, do something that kind of like make people want to watch Brooklyn Nets games, or kind of make people want to learn a little bit more of Cam Thomas? The NBA just does a really bad job, and it seems like they kind of just don't care to try to make it any way better. Because in my next video, you'll see, not many people really know who Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is. Now, if you were to, a lot of people who are watching this video, they would definitely know who Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is. SGA, that's a walking bucket right there. But if you were to ask the average day common person who just simply watches the games as they're on TV, they'll see him, here and there, but they don't know that this guy is actually having an MVP level season. They don't know about many other players that simply just don't have the nationwide coverage that, let's say, a LeBron James's Lakers does, or a Phoenix Suns Kevin Durant team does. It's just simply not there. Now, some can argue that, well, that is because there's a lot of demand there. But we can cultivate that demand to become a lot bigger and a lot more loftier, for that everybody can see when you actually put money and resources behind it. But it seems like the NBA is faltering because they want to make their product as polished as it can be, with the added issues of making it really difficult to even watch the product in the first place. So it doesn't really matter how well the players are, and I don't think the amount of threes is really the guiding motivational factor on why people are turned off. I think more so people are turned off because they simply can't watch the game. Doesn't matter how bad the product is if the product is not something that the average day person can see.